Okay, so we've got another question today, which is why is there such a big interest in atheism? And this is from a name which I can't pronounce. The alphabet that's used to write it is not something that I can even comprehend. So, to whomever, my apologies for not being able to read your name. Atheism has been a big movement, and it's been going on really for about 100 years, a little bit more than that. It's been building ever since the separation of church and state, and people's ability to rely more on the state for support and less on the church, less on religious organizations. Back in the day, at the time when religions were quite strong, you needed to be part of your religious community. You needed to be part of the religious community just to survive. In the event that you had a health crisis, you were reliant upon charity, and most charitable support came from the churches and the church organizations. So if you were not part of, this not just the church, but this could be other, it could be Buddhism, it could be, Islam, it doesn't matter what the religion is, but the societal support primarily funneled through the churches, which meant, and the churches were supported by the state and the community, which meant that it was virtually impossible or nearly impossible to survive as a business if you weren't part of that organization, part of the religious structure, if you were not a supporter of it. Because who in society would want to support you if you weren't part of that religion? Essentially, not being part of the religion at that time meant you were not supporting society. That would be the interpretation. Of course, that you would be a heathen or a sinner. And church having so much power, or religion having so much power, became, in a lot of ways, quite abusive. Because it could. Fear was foundational to much of the teaching. If you're not part of the church, if you're not a believer, a supporter of the religious organization, you would go to hell. And that lesson built up and up, but as technology improved, as people found means of surviving, being able to survive and even flourish without support of the church, due to the church and state being separated, fewer and fewer people joined the church and more people left the church. And the church's reaction to that was more fear, more judgment, more condemnation. That was a mistake. That was a big mistake. It's uninspiring. And that would not have been Jesus's method, Jesus's message, nor would he have supported that, I suspect. Nor would it have been supported by the Buddha, nor would it have been supported by Muhammad. I don't know. I've not read much about Islam, so I can't say too much about that. But let's just say that anybody that is rooted in unconditional love would not have supported that fear-based approach, would not have supported the condemnation and the judgment, the hellfire and damnation approach. And the more the church reacted negatively, the more people began to see the church as itself being corrupt, which of course it was in a lot of ways. Not always. There are some organizations that are probably doing it quite well, meaning well, but the reaction has gone to the extreme. You push hard enough, you get a reaction, and people get pretty angry and frustrated. And then as the state became more powerful, and the state became the means of support through welfare, through medical programs, food stamps, there became absolutely no need to rely on the church. And in fact, as that happened, the media started to support the state because the media gets money from the state, not the church. So the media is also largely opposed to the church and is in support of welfare programs and food stamps and the state. That naturally leads towards atheism. Why believe in a God that would be so cruel? In a lot of cases, the religious or the unquestioning belief of the church has funneled into an unquestioning belief in the state and an unquestioning belief in reason and logic. I am not a supporter of the church, nor am I a supporter of any particular interpretation of reality, nor am I a supporter of the idea of God. Notice I said the idea of God. The human mind is not capable of understanding or encapsulating what the essence of life is. If there were a God, so certainly the God that Jesus spoke of, which would be the Alpha and the Omega, which means all that is, the human being isn't even capable of understanding this, the human body. We don't even know what we are. We don't understand what consciousness is. The idea that we would understand what God is unfounded. The church has claimed, since as far back as it goes, that it owns God, basically, that it has a monopoly on God, and that was a big mistake. Is a big mistake. The church does not own Jesus, does not own God, does not own Buddha. At most, it could be potentially a school of study that might help us to have the experience of the Alpha and the Omega, the experience of connectedness to all of this, experience of that deepest place of truth and integrity and meaning within, at most. But we'll never understand that. Some people say, what do you mean we'll never understand that? To understand something, one must be able to measure it. And to measure something, one must be able to step outside of what is being measured, to compare what is being measured to something else. If God or Buddha or all that is in fact all that is, there's nothing outside of it to which one can measure it from, to which it can be compared. Therefore, it cannot be measured, and therefore it cannot be understood. The mind rejects that idea because the mind is entirely based on comparisons, contrastings, measurements, trying to find its sense of self-worth as compared with everything else. Metaphorically speaking, that is Satan. That is the shadow. Satan, metaphorically speaking, I'm not saying that Satan is a real character. I'm speaking metaphorically, but it's this functional. What I'm saying is functional. The mind wants to be equal to God, wants to be equal to all that is. Again, God also being metaphorical here. I'm using that term metaphorically, not religiously. It works well as a metaphor, and it's practical. But the mind cannot be equal to all it is. It wants to be, it would like to think it is, that it is supreme. And if we look at the original idea of Lucifer being the first angel who wanted to be equal to God, we can see that that metaphor rings true of the mind. And thus it fell and was then out of touch with God and in the lower realm of hell, the realm of suffering, the realm in which we live. So long as we live in the mind and through the mind, and that the mind, as long as mind is leading our lives, we are in a kind of hell, a kind of suffering. constantly insecure, constantly trying to control, constantly trying to dominate, constantly comparing and contrasting ourselves with all that is, and coming up short. It's only when we start to see through the eye of all that is, when we stop believing the mind, that we have the experience, or as I like to say, insperience. It's not truly an experience. Experience indicates something which is learned, which would indicate a knowing or a knowledge. But the experience of all that is will never bring about understanding of all that is. It can't be understood by the mind, so it can't be described as an experience. It would be more appropriately described as insperience, an inspiring experience, I guess would be a way of saying, but it's not a learning. It is a being. It's a being. And through this way of being, connected to the deepest place within, life takes on a kind of meaning that is not logical or reasonable. And inspiration starts to shine through. A kind of intelligence begins to emerge. There's an inner peace. The comparing, the contrasting, and all that stuff starts to fade away. It can happen for practical purposes, but it's not the default. We're not stuck up in constant projections to past and future, living in regret, full of anxiety and depression. There's a kind of freedom that emerges. I believe that's the metaphor of saving one's soul. The soul can't die, but it can experience hell. The saving is elevating perception beyond the mind. In Buddhism, they describe this as buddhi. Buddhi means to transcend the mind. To transcend the mind. That would be the heavenly experience. So that one is no longer perceiving through the eyes of the metaphorical Satan, Lucifer, the light bearer. Strange that they would call Lucifer the light bearer. What is it that the light is shining on? The light is shining on self-awareness. You have an animal. The animal doesn't have self-awareness. It doesn't look in the river and go, that is me. The mind has developed in the human being to look in the river and see the reflection and say, that is me. That is the first light, the light of mind. Lucifer is the light bearer. But there's something deeper than that, and that is consciousness. And consciousness is awareness that I am all that is. It is a felt understanding, I guess, or it's a way of being. It's not really an understanding, it's a way of being. The felt sense of connectedness with all that is. The sense of being doesn't stop with the body. Theism, the idea of God, is again an idea that is also of the mind, that is also a trick of the light bearer, of Lucifer, of Satan, that God could be understood. Religion is caught up in theism, and has been for a long, long time, and has not awakened to the fact that religion is caught up in an idea. And so it is in hell. Atheism is in also hell. It is the new religion in a way. A belief in the state, a belief that man is supreme, belief that mind is supreme. Again, a voice of Lucifer. All of this is metaphorical, understand you. I'm using the religion, the language of religion, but I'm not using it through belief. It just makes a good story metaphor. Makes it very understandable. We could look at this as the hemispheres of the brain. The left hemisphere provides us with definition, knowledge, the sense of self. the right hemisphere. This is not true for everybody, but generally speaking, the right hemisphere is abstract awareness, the stuff of dreams. During meditation, the sense of self fades. The qualities of language may fade. The sense of physicality itself may fade, such that one may begin to feel that one is connected to all that is. That's the aspect of the right hemisphere. We can describe the right hemisphere as the eye of God, and the left hemisphere as the eye of Satan, the first angel who was meant to serve, but did not. The first angel has enslaved awareness and is not serving, so it has fallen and become a demon. When the first angel submits to God and becomes a servant of God, they will then work as a team. And then the left hemisphere will provide a benevolent function, a service like an angel. This is a way of saying it biologically. The story of God and Lucifer and the story of the hemispheres is the same. Man is stuck in knowledge, and that is atheism. Religion is stuck in knowledge. Man is stuck in religion as well. So in a sense, these are just two different demonic entities fighting with each other. Atheism will not be the answer. Theism will not be the answer towards inner peace, towards world peace, towards meaning, unconditioned meaning. Find the deepest place within. Find the experience of all that is. Stop believing the inner voices. Be free. I hope this video helps.